Crash Course Philosophy is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, share your passion with the world.
What gives your life meaning? God, love, money, work, fan fiction, football, shopping, Sherlock. You might have your own personal sense of purpose in your life, or maybe you're hoping this course will help you find one. Or you might believe that you were created with a certain essence as a human being, with a purpose given to you by God. Whatever the case is, no one would fault you for wanting your life to have meaning. A sense of meaning is something that we all crave, maybe even need. And as we move out of our unit on the philosophy of religion, we should spend some time talking about how we understand our lives as being meaningful. Because when you think about it, a lot of us devote a ton of energy to the task of finding meaning in our lives. Maybe you find it through religion, or by fighting for social justice, or educating others, or seeking beauty in artistic expression. No matter how you do it, there's a group of philosophers, the existentialists, who say that any or all of these things can give your life meaning. But at the same time, they say none of them can. As you know by now, philosophy is about the dialectic. Someone puts forth an idea, and then someone else responds to it. Sometimes the response comes right away, in other cases it takes thousands of years. Way back in ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle took it as given that everything has an essence, a certain set of core properties that are necessary or essential for a thing to be what it is. If those properties were missing, then that thing would be a different thing. For instance, a knife could have a wooden handle or a metal handle, it really doesn't matter. But if it didn't have a blade, it wouldn't really be a knife anymore. The blade is the essential property of the knife because it gives the knife its defining function. Now, Plato and Aristotle thought that everything has an essence, including us, and they believed that our essences exist in us before we're even born. So by this thinking, part of what it means to be a good human is to adhere to your essence. Now, you may or may not know what your essence is, and you might be great at living up to your essence, or you may be awful at it. But the important thing is that your essence gives you a purpose, because you were born to be a certain thing. This belief, known as Essentialism, was the standard view of the universe all the way up until the late 19th century, and it's still accepted by many people today. But in the late 1800s, some thinkers started to challenge the idea that we are imbued with any essence or purpose. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, embraced nihilism, the belief in the ultimate meaninglessness of life. But by the mid-20th century, the path had been paved for French thinker Jean-Paul Sartre to return to the question of essence and ask, what if we exist first? What if we're born without any hardwired purpose, and then it's up to us to figure out our own essences? Well, this became the framework for what we now know as existentialism, and its mantra is the claim that existence precedes essence. In other words, our existence, our birth, happens first, then it's up to each of us to determine who we are. We have to write our own essence through the way we choose to live. But we have no actual predetermined purpose. There's no set path that we're supposed to follow. It's hard to express how radical this idea was at the time, because for thousands of years before this, you didn't have to choose a path or find your purpose. God did it for you. But it's important to note that existentialism is not synonymous with atheism. Plenty of existentialists are atheists, but some are theists, like Kierkegaard. What theistic existentialists deny is any sort of teleology. That is, they refute the notion that God made the universe, or our world, or us, with any particular purpose in mind. So God may exist, but instilling you, or your life, or the cosmos with meaning, that's just not in his job description. As a result, we are each born into a universe in which we and our world and our actions lack any real inherent importance. This is a fundamental component of existentialism, and its adherents refer to it as the absurd. You and I think of absurdity as something that's just silly or preposterous, but for existentialists, absurdity is a technical term. It's how they describe the search for answers in an answerless world. We are creatures who need meaning, but we're abandoned in a universe full of meaninglessness. So we cry into the wilderness and get no response, but we keep crying anyway. That, for an existentialist, is the definition of absurd. Since there's no teleology, the world wasn't created for a reason, and it doesn't exist for a reason. And if there's no reason for any of this, then there's also no absolutes to abide by. There's no cosmic justice, no fairness, no order, no rules. Now, existentialism has its roots in late 19th century thinkers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, but it really came into its own during and after World War II, as the horrors of the Holocaust led many people to abandon any belief in an ordered world. And who could blame them? When Nazis became possible, meaning became much harder to find. But Sartre faced meaninglessness head-on and explored one of the most agonizing aspects of existentialism. Not the world's lack of meaning, but its terrifying abundance of freedom. To most of us, freedom sounds pretty great, but Sartre thought that we are painfully shockingly free. After all, if there are no guidelines for our actions, then each of us is forced to design our own moral code, to invent a morality to live by. Sartre took this to mean that we are condemned to be free, a fate that he found to be quite awful. You might think that there's some authority you could look to for answers, Sartre said, but all of the authorities you can think of are fake. You can do what your parents say, or your church, or your government, but Sartre said those authorities are really just people like you, people who don't have any answers, people who had to figure out for themselves how to live. So the best thing you can really do, he determined, is to live authentically. Sartre used this to mean that you have to accept the full weight of your freedom in light of the absurd. You have to recognize that any meaning your life has is given to it by you. And if you decide to just phone it in and follow a path that someone else has set, whether it's your teachers, your government, or your religion, then you have what he called bad faith, a refusal to accept the absurd. If you live by bad faith, you're burying your head in the sand and pretending that something out there has meaning that you didn't give it. Which brings us to this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go to the thought bubble. Sartre explained these ideas through an anecdote about one of his students who faced a difficult decision. The young man was at a crossroads in his life. He could join the military during wartime and go off and fight for a cause that he believed in, and he wanted to do this. He thought it was right. But he also had an elderly mother who was all alone except for him. If he went to war, he'd leave her behind, and that seemed wrong. So he could stay with her and let others fight for justice, or he could go off to war and leave his mother to herself, and likely never see her again. The young man felt a sense of duty to both his cause and to his mother, but he could only serve one. Moreover, if he went to war, he'd just be a very small part of a really big cause. His contribution probably wouldn't be great, but he would be contributing to something that would affect millions of people. But if he stayed behind, he'd make an enormous difference in just one person's life. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So what's the answer? Sartre said the whole point of this young man's decision was that no one could give him an answer. In fact, there was no answer until the man chose one for himself. No moral theory could help him decide because no one else's advice could lead him to a decision that was truly authentic. So his choice, no matter what it was the only true choice, provided that he made it authentically, because it was determined by the values he chose to accept. A lot of people think existentialism paints a pretty bleak picture of the world. In fact, the French philosopher and novelist Albert Camus went so far as to say that the literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself. But most existentialists would remind you that the world and your life can have meaning, but only if you choose to assign it. If the world is inherently devoid of purpose, you can choose to imbue it with whatever purpose you want. So no one can tell you if your life isn't worth anything if you, say, don't have children, or don't follow a lucrative career path, or achieve whatever standards your parents hold you to. And this works not just on an individual scale, but on a global one too. If the world is going to have any of the things most of us value, like justice and order, we're going to have to put it there ourselves, because otherwise, those things wouldn't exist. So a worldview that looks bleak to some may to others seem almost exhilarating. Today, I hope you enjoyed as much as I did learning about essentialism and its response, existentialism. We talked about Jean-Paul Sartre and his ideas about how to find meaning in a meaningless world. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace helps to create websites, blogs, or online stores for you and your ideas. Websites look professionally designed regardless of skill level, no coding required. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com/crashcourse for a special offer. Squarespace, share your passion with the world. Crash Course Philosophy is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. You can head over to their channel to check out amazing shows like The Chatterbox, PBS Spacetime, and PBS Idea Channel. This episode of Crash Course was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio with the help of all these awesome people, and our equally fantastic graphics team is Thought Cafe.
What is existentialism? Existentialism is a philosophy that holds that each of us has to give our own life meanings and purposes. The thinkers from the 90s and 20s that are related to existentialism are Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Fyodor Dostoevsky. They are all opposed to rationalism and address the issues of meaning.
Existentialism was emerging notably in the aftermath of World War I and subsequent societal upheavals. Existentialism gained momentum. Philosophers such as Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre solidified its concept, responding to the crisis of meaning in an ever-changing world. The founder of existentialism is Soren Kierkegaard. He stands as the father of existentialism. He also emphasized the subjective experience, the significance of choice, and critique organized religion, laying foundation ideas for the movement. Factors that lead development of existentialism. First, big historical event. Existentialism grew after World War I and World War II and the Holocaust. These catastrophic events left people feeling disillusioned and searching for deeper meaning in life as traditional beliefs were shattered. Second, smart thinkers' influence. Philosophers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche laid the groundwork for existentialism. Kierkegaard emphasized personal ability and subjective truth, while Nietzsche challenged conventional values, contributing to existentialist ideas. The third one, rejecting all ideas. Existentialism rebelled against established philosophical thought like idealism, rationalism, and it put more value on individual human experiences rather than abstract ideas and universal truth.
The principle and the characteristic of existentialism. What are the principles? The principles are five. The five principles are freedom and responsibility, existence essence, observe, authenticity, and the last one, disbelief in God. I'm going to start with the most important principle, which is disbelief in God. All atheists can categorize as existentialists because they don't believe in God. And the second one is freedom and responsibility. It means that we are free to choose whatever we want, but we must take responsibility of what we choose. And the third one is the observe. The observe means the existentialists comment that in the world there are no meaning to the world. They call this senseless part of the world the observe. And the fourth one, existence precedes essence, meaning that the traditional philosophy concept told that even before we were born, we have been given a fate or what we have to be. But the existentialists deny this, and they said whatever we choose, we decide what we want to be. And the last one is the authenticity. The authenticity means that we have to be honest on our own belief and choice, not by following the society choice and belief. That's all for the principle and characteristic of existential.
Now I want to tell about what is impact of ideology to people. The first one is nationalism. Nationalism influences how a group sees things, combining current event and history to plan ahead. It is emotionally strong, putting loyalty to the nation first. In conflict, it emphasizes national allegiance, seeing the nation as the main political focus and aspect sacrifice for the common good. The debate on whether nations are culture, creation, or inherent entities explored. If nations are natural, with nationalism arguing they are instincts, held together by shared elements like culture or citizenship. The second one is liberalism. Widely followed in the Western world, claimed to be universally true, immigrating in the 70s and 80s centuries. It gained momentum with the rise of capitalism and the industrial middle class. Early advocates like Locke, Voltaire, Adam Smith, and Montesquieu support liberal ideas such as the social contract, emphasizing citizen rights and justifying rebellion against a state infringing on those rights. Locke highlights religious tolerance, emphasizing its importance for social harmony while maintaining loyalty to the state. Liberal values like free speech and tolerance are deeply ingrained in Western society, making them influential and challenging to oppose without seeming extreme. And the last one is fascism. Fascism is a political ideology associated with racism, imperialism, authoritarianism, and state terrorism. In extreme cases like Germany, it resulted in the Holocaust, causing millions of civilian deaths. Fascism used violence for political control against citizens and colonial subjects. Thinkers like Adorno and Horkheimer believe fascism stemmed from modernity's flaw, while Freud saw it as a destroyed representation of power. This perspective offers varied views on physician origins in modern society.
Inshallah, I will present about the strength of existentialism as an ideology. First and foremost, existentialism emphasizes on the importance of unrestricted freedom as an individual to make our own choice and decisions regarding our life. If these key points of existentialism is used and practiced correctly and thoroughly, a path that led to development of ourselves as a human being will be open. With freedom, a wide variety of potential can be explored throughout our life. Meaningful experience, hobbies, goals, and much more can be gained when freedom are in the hands of individuals. All of these key aspects of life are what made our life so meaningful. One of the main issues in this postmodern era is that the society tends to govern individuals' life with strict doctrinal and rigid rules, especially in the east side of the world. As an example, a lot of undergraduate students are forced to pursue their studies in a field that they have no patience or interest in. Therefore, they tend to go through depression that can result to be more social problems such as suicide. In the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 256, Allah has emphasized that there should not be compulsion in religion. Allah has created human with different and unique trait and personality. To be controlled with a rigid rule that block a certain individual's way of life and passion is not a teaching of Islam. In conclusion, the ideology of existentialism is a belief that views the mankind itself as the focal point of life. Every religion or the way of life for each individual are determined by themselves. Although it might not look problematic, the manself itself are created with limited way of thinking. It is a natural occurrence that mankind views their life based off their logical thinking by using their mind, such as deduction and experimentation. But the life that we are experiencing will not be able to understood with only the mind of the mankind. Spiritual occurrence and unexpected situation are not be able to be analyzed only with the brain itself. That is why Islam is not only a worldview but also its way of life. Allah has sent the Quran as a revelation to the mankind so that they can grasp what cannot be grasped by them. The absurdity of life that are claimed by the existentialists are very cruel and not suitable for the nature of human. The act of living and experiencing our life are what made the mankind to strive and pursue what they want. Furthermore, we can conclude that extreme freedom could lead to destruction of mankind. This observation is not only be able to summarize from the analysis of existentialism, but also has been shown to us in this postmodern era condition. The occurrence of LGBTQ, the increase of crime rates, and much more are the result of excessive freedom that are given to the mankind. Lastly, it is fascinating that the Islam worldview has the same important component of the system with other ideology, but with a slight difference. As an example, the very revealing point in terms of similarity, which is freedom. However, the freedom that were given by Islam are given with a set of boundaries that are determined by Allah in order to prevent any disastrous occurrence that cannot be analyzed by mankind. Therefore, the credibility of Islamic worldviews are further established as it given the solution to the shortcoming of other ideology.